You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to another Colts Blue Zone podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths. Always glad to have all of you along for the ride. And sometimes it is a great ride. Sometimes it's a 12-9 ride in overtime. And you still pull out the win. And you know what? That's fantastic. You get a win at the end of the day. And we all told you last week to take the under if you were a betting man. Joe took the under. Everyone out there, I hope you all listened because we knew it would happen. I know you guys both spoke at length about this last week.
Sometimes we know what we're talking about.
Every once in a while. Me more so than everyone else this year, to be fair.
I can't argue.
So that was just pretty much just
that's true. You picked the Colts to lose last week, and look what
Exactly,
happened. So just follow Dave. And
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
That's what
Just listen to what's going to happen. So who knows what Dave's going to say about Jacksonville? You have to stay to the end of the episode to see my prediction that will obviously come true. But we will preview this Colts-Jaguars game set for Sunday afternoon here in Indianapolis. Injury updates, a very lengthy injury report for the Colts on their Wednesday practice. But some optimism now as it gets to Thursday. Maybe things looking a little bit better. We'll break all that down. Keys to the game, predictions. But first, we start with the news around the team this week. We'll start with the good news, and that is Chase McLaughlin is the AFC Special Teams Player of the Week. Whenever you change a kicker mid-season, it could be absolute epic disaster because there's a reason these guys chapper on the street.
Well, and you were forced into the move.
Exactly.
You didn't say, hey, let's go get this guy to upgrade. No, you had to do it.
No, Hot Rod was not viable anymore after what happened week one against Houston. McLaughlin comes in and just this last week in Denver goes 4 of 4 on field goals, 52, 51, 48, 31 yards. So 3 that were not chip shots. The 48-yarder in overtime is the one that put them on top. Then the defense shut the door at the end of the day. Not that kicking in Denver is particularly difficult because the air is a little bit thinner, but the thin air doesn't make it go straight, and he hit them straight. He hit them true. Hit 4 field goals. He's the AFC Special Teams Player of the Week. And Chap, I think that you can't ask for more from a kicker that you get mid-season than to have the ability to do this in a scenario. You're not expecting him to do this every week. You can't do that. He's not going to be Justin Tucker. But if he has the ability to come in and hit multiple 50-yard field goals, be in the category of even competing for an AFC Special Teams Player of the Week, this is what the Colts were hoping for when they got Chase McLaughlin, and he delivered.
That's what we talked about during training camp with Hot Rod and Jake Verite, is you didn't know what Verite brought, but he brought a strong leg. And we always questioned how Frank Reich, as a play caller, handles things when you get around the 50-yard line. You know, how aggressive are you when you know that your kicker, you have no trust in your kicker with long field goals, or as opposed to when your kicker can, Chase is 11 of 13 for his career. That's ridiculous on 50 yards, but that maybe you're not quite as aggressive when you know your guy can do that. You don't want to rely on that. That's crazy. But knowing you've got it, and again, he's done what they needed to do. And again, if Hot Rod had done his job early, then Chase wouldn't be here. And where would this team be? Well, we know where they'd be. They'd be at 3-2 if there's a 42-yard kick that goes through at Houston.
I think, Joe, I felt pretty good watching McLaughlin line up from both 31 yards at the end of regulation and at 48 in overtime. Like, as I'm sitting watching this game, I got the feeling that, you know what, I think he's going to make these kicks. And that is not a feeling that I really had with Hot Rod. It would have been in either of those situations. So you could say that the Colts, I'm not going to go and say they upgraded entirely. I'm not going to say that Chase McLaughlin is the answer, the end-all, be-all, because like I said, there was a reason that he was sitting on the sidelines for the start of the season. I don't want to jump to that conclusion. But at the same time, I think it just felt different to me that to watch a kicker go out and walk onto the field and feel good about his opportunity, his chances for making these kicks than it had in the past.
Well, 250-plus yarders at the beginning of the game
helps.
will do that to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's quite amazing. And I got to say, not to pile on Hot Rod, I think everyone who listens to the show knows that I was really rooting for him. I was a big fan. I don't think the Colts would have won that game on Thursday if he was still the kicker. And I don't say that to be mean. I just say that looking at it like this might be one of the moves if this team ends up reaching the playoffs this year that we look back on and go, boy, if they didn't bring in McLaughlin, this team wouldn't have gotten to where they wanted to go. So there's still a lot of season left, a lot of kicks for McLaughlin to make if he wants to get another contract here or somewhere else. But so far, so good.
Chap, we juxtapose this scenario with what happened a couple years ago with Vinatieri, and you can tell that his issues, his struggles that last year cost a couple games. I'm not saying that bringing in somebody else definitely would have made these kicks, but in this scenario, a change in kicker making that bold move has already paid dividends, it appears, for the Colts.
Yeah, and you made a good point. Let's not say this, they're going to sign him to a 3-year extension.
No, not yet.
Because, again, like whenever you sign guys once a season start, they're out there for a reason. He was at his Westfield home for a reason. So you're looking at sort of week to week, but he gives you what you didn't have. Again, that was a long distance threat, and there's no more pressure than at the end of a game and in overtime. If he misses either one, if he misses the regulation, there's no overtime. So far so good. And again, I agree with you that there was just a different feeling when he was out there. Now again, we've got such a small sample size, and the thing with Hot Rod is the larger sample size why we were uneasy. So far so good, but let's not go crazy and wonder why they're not signing extensions. Let's just let this play out.
It has played out to McLaughlin hitting 11 of his 13 kicks, as you mentioned, though, from 50-plus in early on in this career for him. So that's pretty darn good. More special teams news for the Colts. Wide receiver Ashton Doolin has been placed on injured reserve after suffering a foot injury in Denver. The Colts have said they do expect him to return this season, but you just keep chipping away at that special teams unit. It's the punter that goes down. It's your top gunner that goes down. And it's already a special teams that I think has performed pretty well early this season, to be honest. Both, obviously, we've just been talking about McLaughlin. Matt Hawk has been perfectly fine at punter. There's been nothing that he has done, it seems, that has cost the team significantly in any game. So, but Chap, if you just keep chipping away at the guys who are steady, at the guys who have been here for a long time, you're certainly relying on some of those younger guys to, and the more inexperienced guys to step up when their name is called, and it will be called upon with Doolin here going to be on the sidelines for a couple weeks.
Well, this was a special teams already that lost players in the offseason with George Odom and Matt Adams and a couple other guys too. So and that's why I always think that the special teams coach, when you've got a really, really good special teams group, he's a magic man, because maybe he doesn't know until Saturday night who he really has. Going into Denver, if you don't know Jonathan Taylor's status, and maybe Deion Jackson doesn't play as much on special teams. So it's kind of like, well, you were going to have this guy this game, but we need him more on offense or defense. So I think Bubba's done a great job. And like you say, when you have to replace your punter and your kicker, and you really haven't missed a beat other than the kick at Houston,
right?
Which they adjusted to very quickly. I think he's done a great job.
Mm-hmm. Joe, special teams this year. I mean, you got to think it's pretty good, but this certainly just, I guess, puts it under the microscope, I guess, this weekend.
Yeah, we haven't quite seen the flash plays that we saw at times last year with some block punts, like the one against Jacksonville in Indianapolis last year. Maybe a little foreshadowing there. We'll see. But the special teams unit has not been any sort of liability whatsoever. So Matt Hack has done a solid job for a team that Hawk. I keep saying Hack.
It's just how it's spelled. You look at it, it's like, yeah.
For a team that has a new punter and a new kicker, that they both were brought in like within the first week or so of the season starting. It's pretty amazing that they've been able to be so reliable thus far.
The Colts have signed defensive tackle Chris Williams to the active roster from the practice squad to fill that spot left by Ashton Doolin going to injured reserve. He's been up and down the past couple of weeks with DeForest Buckner's injury, just coming up from the practice squad to the roster for game day, ensuring that they have some bodies there on the defensive line just in case. And the Colts also signed a tackle, Ty Nsheki, to the practice squad. 36-year-old has played in 93 career games. His last start came in Buffalo in 2019. So an experienced guy, but has never been a consistent starter in the league, trying to bring someone in for, I don't know, You signed a 36-year-old to the practice squad. That's all I can say. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where you were going to go with that.
Yeah, they brought him in for, I don't know. But he's there. So he's
It's
actually
a new tackle.
He is. Yes. He's a new tackle. And there he is. And there he will stay. What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with Mayo Clinic specialists to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan, and it means that together we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic. The Colts take on the Jaguars Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock kickoff at Lucas Oil Stadium, broadcast in Central Indiana on CBS 4. You can join us also on CBS 4 for the Colts Blue Zone pregame show at 11:30 Sunday morning. Who is going to play in that game, who is not? We'll talk about the Colts injury report first. I've already mentioned Ashton Doolin's on injured reserve, so he will not play. Wednesday, there was a laundry list of players on this Colts injury report. And for the players who did not practice, first of all, a couple guys just with veteran rest days and Stephon Gilmore and Yannick Ngakoue. After that, players who did not practice on Wednesday, Jonathan Taylor with his ankle, still on the bench. Center Ryan Kelly with a hip. Linebacker Shaquille Leonard with his concussion, nose injury, and still listed with his back injury. Defensive end Kwity Paye with the ankle. Cornerback Tony Brown with a concussion. Defensive tackle Eric Johnson with an illness. Limited participation, Nyheim Hines with a concussion, Tyquan Lewis with a concussion, safety Julian Blackman with his ankle injury was back on the field practicing, so an encouraging sign, and a full participant in practice, Quentin Nelson, though he does show up on the injury report with ankle and shoulder injuries. Now, if we look at Thursday, what we've seen so far as we tape this podcast, the Colts are on the field as we speak, so that official practice report will come a little bit later in the day. You can follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone to get those notes throughout the week. But as our very own Brett Bensley is out of practice, saying that Jonathan Taylor, Ryan Kelly are both practicing for the Colts. Kwity Paye is there, but he does not look to be practicing. Had a sleeve, had a brace over his ankle. So says Brett. A couple other people who I saw. Let's see. I literally just had them, and then
They
gone.
were the only ones. I was out there too with Brett.
Okay.
That weren't practicing. Of course, Shaq and Kwity.
Right.
Everybody else, I believe,
Was back out there. Okay, so that includes Eric Johnson,
and we'll
Tony
see.
Brown.
Well, I
We'll
didn't see Eric Johnson.
Okay.
I wasn't looking for Eric Johnson.
Right, exactly. You're looking for them the other year. No disrespect to Eric Johnson.
There are priorities, and you
Yes.
check. But and we'll see later in the day on which ones were full, which ones were limited.
Right.
What I noticed was that Tyquan Lewis, who's in protocol, did not have the red jersey, which means he's taken that next step.
To full.
Nyheim Hines still had the red jersey, which means he's a little behind. But keep in mind, Tyquan had like a week on him as far as being out. So we'll see. And we won't know. Now, Jonathan Taylor, again, we talked to him, and he's really, really good at giving us nothing.
He's the best.
Which is fine. I mean, I understand that. But, you know, I think that the thing is today is test it with a good practice, see how it feels tomorrow. And if it's not too bad, then practice again tomorrow, and then he plays. But I really think they're in good shape injury-wise. I think Julian Blackman's got a chance, although I tell you, Rodney Thomas is playing pretty well.
Right?
So that's a good issue to have.
Yeah.
Ryan Kelly practicing is a good thing. So I think they're in really pretty good shape health-wise.
I mean, heck, Rodney Thomas had one interception.
Should have had two.
And he might have had two. Yeah.
The ref didn't get in.
Yeah, you got to be really happy. But the ref's part of the playing field, so like you look at him like, well, dadgummit, it should have been this. But I felt bad for the ref too, because he's like trying to get away from the ball.
He's trying to get the heck out of there.
He's not doing his job in that scenario. Sometimes you see a ref just lollygagging, like what are you doing? Get out of the way. What's going on here?
He was trying to get the heck out of the way.
He was, and he just couldn't
he
do it.
couldn't get out of there faster than professional.
I know, right? Yeah, for real. So in the moment, like you're yelling at him if you're a Colts fan, but I think after the emotion dies down, you can understand that it was just a really tough situation for him to be in. So
It's unfortunate. They still won. It's all good.
I know. You still won. So you could forgive him entirely with
right.
the win. And Rodney got another interception later, so he got one anyway. All's well that ends well.
So with the injuries, it looks like the most unlikely to play is Kwity.
He won't play.
He might
Shaq.
be several weeks out, and Shaq doesn't look like this week, next week, unknown.
I was told, of course, Frank told us they had to wait until the swelling went down, but he's going to have surgery on the nose. Now, I guess I was surprised with both Quiddy and Shaq that they weren't put on IR because that's 4 games.
Right.
And if you do that before the Denver game, then this is the second game. It just shortens it, but it would give you every indication to think that maybe Quiddy plays, if not next week, then the week after, which that's Washington.
Yes, it is.
Because if that's not the case, then why didn't you IR him? Mm-hmm. So now the only downside, if you IR guys, they can't practice, but it just tells you that they didn't think these guys would be out 4 games.
Yeah, we'll see about Shaquille with a nose surgery that is likely. I don't know if there's plastic surgery that is.
I don't know.
Who knows? Because if noses get really bent out of shape, quite literally, it can lead to problems. It can lead to breathing problems, and those are things that get really complicated up there. It's not just a matter of setting the bone and letting it heal. And with the nose, a lot of times when I broke my nose when I was in elementary school, it didn't need to be set. It didn't need to be anything like that. It healed normally. But I also didn't get hit in the head with Zaire Franklin's helmet.
He must have just been smashed.
Yeah,
it blew up his face mask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if it hit that hard, it could be bad. And we haven't had the chance to talk to Shaquille about it.
We've not seen Shaq in the locker room.
No, nowhere. And I'm not surprised that we haven't seen him because I'll bet that his face is pretty mangled. My face was mangled enough, and I just got hit by a baseball.
He probably looks like a boxer that just took a chin round beating.
Yeah. So, like you said, the swelling has to go down. Then you have to evaluate. Then you actually have to do it. So
IR just made sense.
It did, exactly.
It's just crazy. Now, with Quiddy, who knows? But with all they're dealing with Shaq, it just made sense. But
oh well. But who are we? But who are we to judge?
Correct. They just maybe they call and I just don't see that they call asking for advice. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Jaguars injury report. A couple players ruled out, including a starting left guard Ben Barch was placed on injured reserve this week with a knee injury. They did sign a veteran, John Miller, who played for the Panthers last year, has 84 career starts. That's a lot of experience for a guard who hasn't been playing, but I kind of went over, it's like who is this guy? Why is a guy with so many starts not on a team, on a roster anywhere? Well, I looked on his Pro Football Focus page before I came in here, and he graded out like a 52 last year, and that's on a 1 to 100 scale. I think good offensive linemen are in the 70s. And if you're in the 80s, you're really good.
Yeah,
for
good
the most
is
part.
in the 70s. Okay is like the 60s.
Yeah, but he's 52, so it's low 50s.
It's below average.
And he allowed 7 sacks last year. As a guard, he allowed 7 sacks last year. So it's okay, now I understand why he wasn't on anybody's roster.
Putting Buckner right over him.
There you go. DeForest, you see this guy and go. So that would be ideal if he is going to be the one who's playing. So, or they just signed him
or
for
whoever
something.
the backup.
Exactly. Yeah.
There.
Put it seriously, because we've talked about this, and you guys have talked about this too, on your Mondays or your game recap stuff. Like when DeForest Buckner has been on this year, the Colts have been a different team. They've been a different defense, and he has been really good in a couple games specifically. He was great in Denver. He was really good in their win against the Chiefs as well. He has, and he's fighting through injuries. So you can understand.
It's an elbow, right?
It is. It's an elbow injury. So you can understand in that sense some of the, I don't know if inconsistency is the right word in his play, but just the level just shoots up when he has things going for him, when he has the elbow under control, when things are feeling good for him. Chap, he's having a pretty good year right now, and it's kind of gone under the radar, I think, a little bit.
Quarterbacks do not like pressure up the middle.
No.
They whatever comes from the outside, you've always got the calmness to step up. But when you've got 6'7" Buckner in front of you, you can't do that. He had, 2 sacks, batted the ball down, and the attention he got on the early sack for Ngakoue allowed that sack to happen. So it's just – I don't think that 3 technique is as much of a focal point in this defense as it was with Eberflus. But when your guy inside, he and Grover, when they can do what they do, Grover's more not, you can't move him and he makes plays in a run game and occasionally, of course, a nice block field goal as well. Buckner's what he does when he can get pressure inside, it just disrupts everything.
Also, the Jaguars have ruled out their edge rusher, Kalavion Chason, with a knee injury. He was placed on injured reserve also this week. Only has 2 career sacks was a first-round pick in 2020. Joe, is that right? He only has 2 career sacks?
Yeah, he's not been doing a whole lot.
Okay,
but he's an athletic presence on
Right.
the edge and former first-round pick who's still young. So
Well, they have some other playmakers on defense
They
that we'll
do.
get to for sure.
They've
And
spent-
the Colts have had a first-hand look at 1 or 2 of them in particular that we will get to coming up in more of our preview area here. But a couple players who were limited in participation practice on Wednesday include a couple players on the defensive line, a linebacker, and some of these names are not the easiest names to say, so I'm not going to say
Go
them.
ahead, Dave.
No, it's cool. But they're all limited, and Zay Jones is among them was limited on Wednesday with an ankle. But nobody was ruled out, or nobody did not participate in Wednesday's practice. So their injury report is much shorter than the Colts this week. But nevertheless, they don't have Barch, their starting left guard. They don't have their edge rusher Clavion Chase on either for this weekend's game. The Colts are 2-2-1. The Jaguars are 2-3. As I've said, 1 o'clock kickoff, game broadcast in Central Indiana on CBS 4. Chap, we have made much, and understandably so, of the Colts' awful streak in Jacksonville, or just on the road in particular, because it includes 1 game in London. Just as impressive, really, or almost as impressive, I should say, has been the Colts' streak against Jacksonville as the home team. They've won 4 in a row, and 8 of their last 9 overall inside Lucas Oil Stadium. So even though last year, as we talk about it being close, and the Colts needed a defensive player to step up, they got one with Dio stopping a drive, going and stripping the ball from Trevor Lawrence there late. They have still won 8 of their last 9 against the Jaguars here in Indy.
Well, that's what we were talking. JT says it's about protecting your home, and that's what you have to do. They're behind the 8 ball as far as the division, or the 0-2-1 in the division now.
Yes.
But you've got to. You can't struggle at home as well. It's just too hard to win on the road, as we've seen. So you're right. It's kind of a flip in the series, and you need to extend that, because I go back to how close these guys were to being first in the division, with Washington knocking on the door at the end of the game. So Joe and I talked about this, and it's going to be true unless you're just awful. You're going to be relevant in the AFC South because it's the AFC South. So take care of business at home, and then we won't get into it now, but then you've got Tennessee next week in Nashville. So no matter how poorly they've played so far, things are in place to get better real quick.
Certainly helped that the Jacksonville couldn't get anything going on offense, really, Joe, last week in a 13-6 loss to the Texans at home. I mean, it was close late, but Texans made a couple plays late, and Trevor Lawrence, he still shows that he is still in development. Those first 2 games of the season were pretty good. After that, he's had a couple of ups and downs since then. But this Jacksonville team, after a promising start to the year, they're trying to find their footing, I think, a little bit right now. Trying to rebound from this loss last week to the Texans.
Yeah, they had a close loss week 1 to the Commanders, and then they blew the doors off of the Colts and Chargers in back-to-back weeks. And we're all here saying, the Jaguars might be a force to be reckoned with this year, not just for the Colts, but for the entire league. Trevor Lawrence looking great, kind of come back to earth a little bit the last 2 weeks, and I have some more stats that really break that down once we get to players to watch.
Right. The Jacksonville offense this year is pretty close to average in terms of just points and yards per game. They're 15th in scoring, 22 points per game, 13th in yards with better than 350 yards per game. They're dead even, 16th in passing, 16th in rushing yards in the NFL.
Balanced.
Their offensive line has done pretty well with the 3rd fewest sacks allowed, only allowing 6 sacks. I think most of them came against Philadelphia 2 weeks ago, just from all the Eagles accounts that I follow. Because
I think we sacked 4 times.
Yeah, and I think there were 2 true strip sacks as well that
4.
week. So 4 strip sacks?
He had 4 sack fumbles.
Okay, well, geez, thank you for pointing that out. That was crazy. So they have 8 turnovers, which, again, playing the Eagles, which appear to have one of the best defenses in the league.
5 of them came against the Eagles.
Exactly, right there. Just kind of blows that a little bit out of proportion. And also shows that other than that game, they've taken care of the ball really well. So is it an opportunistic defense, Chap, that can take the ball away from them? Sure, the Colts have also proven that when their defense is good, it is one of the best in the league right now, I think.
Yeah, I was looking. There's one team in the league this year that's not allowed a point in the 4th quarter. It's Indy.
That's right.
It's crazy. And I think they've given up only 30 points maybe or 34 points in the second half. So that means that they're not getting a lot done in the first half. But they've shown the ability in 2 or 3 games to close the door. We talked about Matt Hawk not doing his job, but he had the one bad punt was, remember in Houston in overtime, where he gave Houston a short field, and the defense covered it up.
Yep.
So that's what you want. I went back and looked too. What was the score in Houston last week? The Jacksonville lost
13-6. Houston
had like 421 yards. Or Jacksonville did. I mean, that's tough to do.
Yeah.
So I talked to a guy in Jacksonville. They move up and down the field, then they just lost their way late in drives. So the one thing to keep in mind, and Joe's probably got on here, I didn't get a chance to look at this very closely, but Trevor Lawrence eats these guys up. His 2 best games, I believe, have been against the Colts. So, but I like the way this defense is playing. Gosh, you just wish your offense would help them.
Yeah.
You can only do so much defensively.
We'll get to more about Lawrence shortly. Let's talk about the Jacksonville defense quickly first. And they have a pretty good defense. The 5th fewest points in the league, averaging 16 points per game. 9th fewest yards in the league, averaging 313 yards against them. They're average against the pass. They're pretty good against the run. And they're allowing only 3.7 yards per carry, which ranks 4th in the league. Sacks, they don't get after the quarterback great. They only have 10 sacks on the year through 5 games. They are 5th in takeaways, though. They have 9 takeaways, so they have been an opportunistic defense themselves, taking the ball away.
They have 10 sacks. Didn't they have 5 against the Colts?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean,
so there you go.
It was like 10 hits and 5 sacks. My impression is that their defense is more aggressive and disruptive than that, but those are the numbers.
Yep. Yeah, you can't argue with them. Now we get to the players to watch. Trevor Lawrence. Chap, you just said that he has played some of his best football against the Colts, and you're completely right. His game this year against them was really, really good, and I think Joe has a stat even later that is going to come up in keys to the game somewhere that I did see it. I swear I saw it. Yeah, that will kind of break down more about why he has been particularly effective against the Colts. But he has, Joe, struggled lately. As we mentioned, his first 3 games, he had 6 touchdowns and only 1 turnover, but 2 touchdowns and 7 turnovers the last 2 games. So even other than the 5 turnovers against Philadelphia there, or the 4 sack fumbles, maybe an interception, there have been 7 turnovers total. So Houston got to him once or twice. He threw a really bad pass in the end zone that Derek Stingley picked off that could have been 3 points. It could have been 7 points if he'd just done something different, but his completion percentage has gone way down. But yeah, against the Colts, we see some of his numbers here. They were really good. They were very much different than he had the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I just quickly went through Trevor Lawrence's game logs his entire career. His 2 highest games in terms of completion percentage have both come his last 2 games against the Colts. So really the quick passing game, getting the ball out, kind of goes hand in hand with what the Colts defense schematically has been willing to give up. And so that kind of plays right into what Jacksonville wants to do, is just get the ball out quickly to their playmakers and let them eat up some yards after the catch.
And one of those playmakers that had a really good game against the Colts first time out was Christian Kirk, the wide receiver. They paid a boatload of money to, backed up the Brinks truck to bring him from Arizona to Jacksonville this offseason. But he only had 1 catch for 11 yards last week against Houston. He's still leading the team in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and targets this year. And against the Colts, Chap, he had 6 catches for 72 yards, 2 touchdowns. As Joe said, it was very much a quick-hitting passing attack. And I again, juxtapose that with what the Chiefs were doing, is dropping back the very next week after this, after the Jaguars really showed the blueprint to beat the Colts and did some very different things on offense. They tried to do what they do and let plays develop, let Mahomes evade the pressure if he could, and then try to beat them long. The Jaguars proved how they could beat this Colts defense. It's a matter of if they can do it again and if the Colts can make the adjustments to try to make them do something else, I think, this weekend.
And you would think the adjustment is to be more pressure on defense.
Right.
And make Lawrence go to read number 2 or 3, and not because of that first game, it was the foot hits the ground and the ball's out.
Yep.
So if you're going to give your defensive front a chance, then take away those quick throws and have faith that either the line's going to get there or your safeties or even your corners can cover up deep. So you just can't have it both ways. You can't, not you can't not pressure the receivers and expect your pass rush to get there because there's not time.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to the running game, the Jaguars have been historically, Joe, like a running team. You have Maurice Jones-Drew for years. Before that, you had Fred Taylor for years. I think they're trying to transition to more of a quote-unquote modern NFL offense with more of a passing game, and then you run at the end to try to win. Like you pass to rack up points to score, and then you run to keep the ball away from teams at the end of the game to control things. James Robinson is their control guy, and he played more often the first couple games of the season. But Travis Etienne is more the big play guy, and he seems to have caught on a little bit more lately.
Yeah, first-round pick from a couple years ago, and he was injured, of course, all of last year. This is kind of really his rookie season, and with a new coaching staff who didn't draft him, he's kind of had to prove himself throughout the first few weeks of the season, and he's earned more playing time. He's gotten more snaps than Robinson each of the past 2 weeks. He's averaging better yards per carry than Robinson. He's 4.9 on the year, so he's really the big play threat in the backfield. He has the speed to make you pay. Robinson, meanwhile, had the hot start to the season, touchdown in each of his first 3 games, was averaging 4.5 yards per carry during those first 3 games. Over his last 2, he's averaging 3.1 yards per carry, no touchdowns, and has gone from 56% of the snaps during his first 3 games to 43% during his last 3. So we're seeing the coaching staff kind of do maybe a bit of a transition. I still think it's kind of a 50-50 backfield in terms of these are the 2 guys. And then just for fun, maybe they'll mix in Agnew, who had a big game against the Colts last year in Indianapolis. So can't forget about him. But it looks like they're starting to go to Etienne, who's just more capable of ripping off those big plays and giving you more efficiency per touch.
Yeah, and Chap, if you're going to want to, as you said, be more of an aggressive defense, whether that's with your edge rushers getting upfield and pressuring Lawrence, or with the secondary kind of being out there and doing more press coverage on the outside, you can't forget about Etienne as a guy who's going to be coming out of the backfield, and as Joe just said, is a guy who's just now getting a little bit more responsibility than he had earlier this year, because if you just blow past him and you allow Lawrence to dump it off to him, he's a guy that can really make you pay if he gets into that second level of the defense.
Well, like Joe said, he's sort of like of what they want to do as a future offense, to where be more aggressive with your running backs, and he's the one, like you said, get him out in space. It's kind of what the Colts would like to do with Nyheim Hines, that we're still waiting for.
Maybe one day.
Maybe when he goes in the Ring of Honor, he gets his touches. But I've never thought that the running backs that just try to bludgeon the Colts are the ones that hurt them. Robinson had the decent day against Indy, but that included a 37-yard run.
Yes.
Yeah. Which totally bloats your averages. I think it's the running back that can get out in space. They hit on screens, and if you miss a tackle, it's 20 yards. There were 1 or 2 of those in Denver with who was the running back? Boone,
yeah.
Boone, he hurt him on a couple of plays, and those are the ones that can gash a defense, and this team needs to really limit the big plays out of the running game.
Yeah, with Robinson, he had 23 carries for 64 yards the first time he met the Colts. So outside of that 37-yard run, he had 22 carries for 27 yards. So that's pretty darn good. And especially, as Joe pointed out earlier, he averaged 4.5 yards per carry the first 3 games of the season. So that game was really the outlier. He had 2 really good games around it. He was running really well. But now he's getting a little bit less time there. Etienne's getting a little bit more. The coaches have decided to give him more of the share. So we'll see exactly how things break down here against the Colts after Robinson has already proved to not be the most effective running back against this defense. I would imagine to see more Etienne, but who knows? Maybe Robinson will get some fourth-quarter touches if the Jaguars are ahead and they're trying to milk a lead, because he's the guy kind of to do that, to be more of the between-the-tackle guy and try to move the chains that way. On defense, Josh Allen is a stud. At least he is against the Colts. He leads the Jaguars with 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, and 2 of those 3 sacks this year came against the Colts. And in fact, he has 2 sacks in both of the last 2 games against the Colts, the one to close out last year and the one in week 2 of this year. And with the Colts' offensive line issues, which we're going to certainly talk about in our keys to the game, Mike, there's no way that the Colts feel good, I think, about this game if Josh Allen starts to be the game wrecker that he was and has been really the last two games against them.
Well, we saw that last week in Denver with Browning and Bradley Chubb.
You got to figure something out.
Speed rushers on the outside really give these guys issues. And then if you're not careful, like with Jacksonville, then they do a lot of problems with stunts that these guys didn't pick up. Mm-hmm. And then Kansas City comes with the blitzers. So, and this is with an offensive line that you just don't know what you've got. They don't know what they've got. So if they don't deal with Josh Allen and Walker, it's going to be a long day for Matt Ryan, and we've seen what happens when he has long days.
Joe, Devin Lloyd, a rookie first-round pick, is a pretty darn good player. You never know with linebackers. You can come in and make an impact right away, and Lloyd certainly seems to have done that in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I remember he was coming out of college compared to Darius Leonard in terms of he had the long, lanky build with those long arms, very instinctive in coverage, got his hands on a lot of footballs, and that's what he's doing in the NFL so far. He leads this team with 49 total tackles, 2 interceptions, and 6 passes defended. So Matt Ryan's going to have to be very aware of where he is in the middle of the field. He had one of his interceptions in 3 passes defended against the Colts in week 2. Mm-hmm. So really was able to just read Matt Ryan and see where he was going with the football in that one. This is a guy that has instantly, first-round pick, come onto the scene and made a big impact for the Jaguars. And let's remember, in that game, I think Matt Ryan was kind of focused more on the middle of the field because they were missing Pierce and Pittman. So without 2 of their top wideouts, they had to lean more on running backs and tight ends. We'll see if they're able to avoid Lloyd a little bit more by targeting their weapons on the perimeter.
Yep, that's a great point. I think the Jaguars can come into this game feeling confident, knowing that you just shut this team out 3-4 weeks ago, whatever it was. But the Colts have to feel pretty good knowing that they have those 2 guys back. I mean, if you don't have Pittman, you don't have Pierce. That severely limits what you are able to do on offense. So I think you have, if you're the Colts, a trick or 2 up your sleeve that the Jaguars chap did not see that first time down there in Jacksonville.
And we've seen teams doing a decent job of limiting Pittman the last game or 2.
They have, yeah.
But boy, Pierce is he's showing you these last 3 games, he had no catches in the opener and a big drop. And then he misses week 2. But he's just been, and I tell you, Matt Ryan's not made it easy on him. He's making him make tough catches, and he's done it. And it's just so encouraging to see the second-round pick when a lot of us had, not that we thought he wasn't going to be a player, we thought it might take him a while to kind of get his feet on the ground. But when you see him in the locker room or during a game, he's just unflappable. He's just like the same steady line.
Yep.
And he's making catches, big catches. And, again, not having him in week 2 was major. And to have both those guys back, it's got to help the passing game.
Since 1951, Hancock Health has been centered around you. And now, as a member of the Mayo Clinic Care Network, our services are amplified by the world leader in medicine. We were selected by Mayo Clinic because of our commitment to caring for East Central Indiana. Now, our local experts are taking that commitment further by consulting with Mayo Clinic specialists and working together to make health possible. Learn more at hancockhealth.org/Mayo Clinic.
Well, let's talk about our keys to the game this week as the Colts take on the Jaguars here in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. 1 o'clock kickoff Sunday afternoon. The keys have to start with the offensive line, Mike, because it is the one area the Colts keep searching for answers. They traded 1 guy out. They traded 3 guys around. It's going to be different again. Bernhard Raimann is going to be the left tackle right now, is what Frank Reich said this week. They're going to roll with him. Whether there are mistakes or not, and there will be mistakes, what Frank said, they're going to take some lumps out there. You have to, with a 3rd-round rookie tackle who just started playing football 7 years ago. But outside of him, it's still not settled. It's not just there's one position. The Colts have had different issues along the offensive line, and this is not the time in the middle of the season to be shuffling combinations and seeing what works, but it's a situation the Colts find themselves in because of the problems they've had up front.
Nothing tells you the desperation they were at to change 3 positions on a short week with like 1 or 2 walkthroughs. That's incredible that they thought that basically what they're saying is, can it be worse? Well, and it really was. Because I thought they really, Raimann had, I think he gave up, was it 4 penalties?
4 penalties.
And 1 was declined. And there were 6 sacks. And he gave up 5 pressures, and I think Matt Pryor at right tackle gave up 8 or 9 pressures. That's just, there will be, I think it's fair to say there will be a different alignment this week. I don't know why they didn't leave Braden Smith at right tackle. Frank said they wanted to try to boost the run game on the interior, but you downgraded 2 positions. Forget about left tackle. You downgraded right guard and right tackle. You made each of them worse. So I leave Braden Smith at right tackle and then figure out guard. And if it's not Pryor, then Will Fries. I don't know if Dennis Kelly's an option inside at guard.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think they leave Smith at guard and try Dennis Kelly at right tackle, since tackle's his, normal position?
These have got to be the 2 most expensive guards of all time in the NFL.
I would rather, facing a team with the outside rush that these guys have got, I would rather be more confident in my outside protection than interior. But can you imagine you're going to have Quentin at $20 million a year at right guard, and you have Smith at 17, whatever it is, and then by the way, Kelly's making whatever it is, 14 or 15 million, 13 million. But the fact that they're not throwing darts on the wall, but they seem to be awful close to that. I just leave Braden Smith at right tackle, and then figure out right guard. And by the way, get Ryan Kelly back to playing at a high level, because he's not playing well.
No, he's not. And it was noticeable that Danny Pinter came in the second half for an injured Ryan Kelly.
Things settled down a little bit.
They did. And I don't know if that's just making adjustments at halftime and the coach is doing a good job, or if that's Pinter. And somebody asked Frank Reich this week, has there been consideration? He said they're not talking about it.
Right.
Said they have not talked about replacing Ryan Kelly at center. So that is not an option on the table right now. So we'll leave it at that. Dennis Kelly's also been asked about too, because you brought him in for some reason.
He told Joel Erickson, he said,
Yes.
I came here to play.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, Dennis Kelly did not participate in offseason work with the knee issue. He misses training camp because he had a knee procedure, which we call surgery.
Yes.
So it's just, he's not been involved in this offense. And once you get into the season, it's hard to get guys caught up to what they missed. But
it's also hard to change 3 guys and run one short week and be competent. So you're right.
I have a hard, they may do it. I have a hard time believing they leave Matt Pryor in the lineup. I just, it's like they're trying to hide him. And you can't hide people in the NFL.
Not when they're on the field.
No, you can't do it.
You can hide them on the bench.
Right. So
only place.
I go back to Smith and then I try to figure out right guard.
Yeah.
I get why they got to keep trying things out, because what they're doing isn't working. But don't you get the sense that this week, maybe next week, but after that, they kind of got to stick to some sort of a lineup so that they can get some continuity together? It also doesn't do these guys any favors when they're switching positions and they have new guys next to them all the time.
Yeah, you can't do this the rest of the year. You're right. Yeah, this is not going to be a week-to-week thing from now until week 18. Like, if right now you're trying to find something that works and you figure if you take 3 weeks to do that, you're going to have to take your lumps along the way. That's how I see it.
Well, at some level, you're putting Matt Pryor in a position to fail. He spent all off season preparing at left tackle. And as we found out, that didn't work, and he wasn't the answer. So now you put him at right tackle, which is probably more of a natural position, but he hasn't played there since last year. And then if you put him at right guard when he hasn't played there for a while. So it's not where you want to be. And the thing that's strange is, for the most part, they're not making these changes because you've got guys hurt. It's because you can't figure out the right combination. And Joe mentioned it, and it's really a difficult situation where the most important thing on the offensive line, well, one, it's talent. It's having the right guys. But then it's continuity. You always hear these guys say you've got to have trust in the guys next to you and continuity. But it was obvious they had to make a change after the first 3 games, and then they changed. They put Fries in at right guard for Penner, and then they changed it again. So, like Joe said, you give them props for making changes. But at some point, you want to be able to keep the same group together so you can see what you got, but you can't do that at the expense of the offense.
And this group is the one group that, if you look at the team as a whole, would be the reason that Chris Ballard could be quote unquote under fire a little bit just for how this team is built this year, because it's the one that you delve so many resources into, but it's still performing at a subpar level. And I saw something this week. It was a Pro Football Focus tweet, and it made me shake my head because I remember talking about the draft 2 years ago, leading into it, and where the Colts
Second
were.
highest graded left tackle in the league.
A young Christian Darrisaw.
Yeah,
yes.
the guy that
Joe knew exactly what I was talking about.
I saw that tweet as well, and I got a little red in the face seeing that.
Left tackle Christian Darrisaw, second highest in the league, and he has allowed 1 sack in his last 350 pass blocking snaps. I know Chris Ballard said he didn't like him as much at left tackle. He wanted, and they had more of an onus on filling the defensive end spot there. That was a position A that they wanted to fix, I think, is what we saw through their with the next pick series. At least that's what they want us to believe.
And Eric Fisher was in the back of their mind, too.
And Eric Fisher, you're right. You're completely right. Eric Fisher was in the back of their mind. But it's still, it casts more light about this problem, that when there was an opportunity to fix this at left tackle, they decided to go elsewhere. And I'm not going to bring Kwity Paye down at all. I think he was playing really well until his ankle got hurt.
He leads the team in sacks.
He's playing darn good football. And we talk so often about the need for an edge rush, so it's hard to criticize Ballard for picking Kwity Paye when he is playing well and it was a position of need. But it's still an issue that, because of how bad the offensive line has been and how the inefficiencies and inconsistencies there have spread to other positions on the team, quarterback not being good enough, running game not being good enough, it is a reason at least to have some criticism that is valid toward Chris Ballard in how he has built this team.
I thought the biggest mistake they made in that is they basically gave left tackle to Pryor, and they gave right guard, gave left tackle to Pryor and gave right guard to Penner in camp and said it's theirs.
Right.
There wasn't any competition. Bernard Ryman didn't compete.
Was not a competitor, no.
At left tackle. So I think that's the biggest issue. And I saw Pro Football Focus had their offensive line rankings today. Colts are 32.
Dead last.
Isn't there 32 teams in the league? So, and it's one where sometimes you want to argue with their ratings. Can't do it. 21 sacks.
Can't do it. Won't do it.
And you can't make me.
Yeah. We'll see. A lot of resources, a lot of the offensive line in terms of money. Bernard Ryman is the highest draft pick Ballard has spent on an offensive tackle, and that came late in the third round. Braden Smith was a guard when they selected him, played guard at Auburn, and was a surprise guy who worked out at right tackle because of injuries.
He went to tackle because they were out of tackles.
Yep.
That was at camp that they lost everybody.
It's like the Kenny Moore move. Like they needed somebody. Throw him in there. They lost every tackle. Okay, throw Braden out there. And Coach Gouge, to be fair, who has been through the ringer with a bunch of different teams since he was also unceremoniously let go from the Colts, credit to him saying he thought that Braden Smith was a tackle, and he has been.
Yep. And then so basically Ballard, who preaches the trenches, offensive line, defensive line, line. In one draft, he took a guard in top 6 and a second guard at the top of the second round, and has basically ignored the offensive line since, aside from 5th and 6th round draft picks, because Kelly was already with the team when Ballard was brought in. And they did sign Eric Fisher. That didn't work out well. He's still a free agent.
I wouldn't mind him being the left tackle now.
That's what I'm saying. Bring Eric Fisher back. But
He's not worse than what they have.
Maybe he does. Maybe he sees his team and doesn't want to come back. I don't know what the deal is. But
if I was him, I would understand.
I get why some people have Chris Ballard in the hot seat, because this offensive line that has so much paid. The Colts talk about the trenches. Well, you've kind of neglected the offensive line recently, and it shows.
How about the defensive line? Key number 2 for this game. Get some pressure on Trevor Lawrence. They did not pressure him in week 2. And we've already said it was difficult to do because they were getting the ball out so quickly. But if it was easy to do, I would be out there doing it, making $10 million a year. It's not easy to do. You're asked to do it. Go do it. 0 sacks week 2. He was hit just twice. And Trevor Lawrence, Joe, as you explained, completed 83% of his passes. His best 2 games in completion percentage have come against the Colts. That needs to change, and to do that, it's the defensive line that needs to start driving the ship.
Defensive line needs to step up, and I think they need to adjust their coverage and play a lot closer on these receivers. I mean, if you're going to give receivers 5, 6, 7 yards off the ball at a time, they'll hit them with those quick passes every time and just dink and dunk all the way down the field because they have the kind of patience to do that, and that's what Trevor Lawrence is most comfortable with. So I'd like to see them get up into the grill of these wide receivers. And I don't want players playing out of place, but if we're going to get into some press man, I'd almost say put Gilmore on Christian Kirk because I think Christian Kirk would continue to abuse Kenny Moore in the slot, although Kenny did have a nice game last week in Denver, really his best game of the season.
Yes, it was.
But if I'm the Colts and I'm thinking about Kenny Moore versus Christian Kirk man-to-man in the slot, I don't like that one bit.
Colts do, Chap, have 8 sacks in their 3 games since that travesty in Jacksonville. So good news, they're playing better. Bad news, they don't have Kwity Paye. But if you have DeForest Buckner and also Dio Danglo seem to play really well, too. So if you have both of those guys and they're still playing at the same level they have in recent weeks, that could go a long way toward doing a lot better than you did in week 2.
And they're going to get Tyquan Lewis back. And he's one of those guys that's really easy to not pay attention to him. And I think when you don't have him, it just stresses the rotation. So I think he gives you flexibility inside. He can play outside. I like he and I like Dio, what they can bring and compensate for Kwity being out.
Also, finally, last key to the game, Joe creates some big plays. You can't expect this offensive line to consistently block Jacksonville's front, but when they do, you have to take advantage of those opportunities and get some big chunks.
Yeah, at this point, there's no reason to believe the offensive line will consistently for a whole, double-digit play series block well enough. So you got to get some big chunk plays so that you're not asking them to do that multiple times per game. In the Week 2 meeting, the Colts had just 4 plays of 20-plus yards, and the first one didn't come until there was 10 seconds left in the third quarter, already down by 24 points.
Oh, man.
But then how do you get big plays when you can't protect the quarterback?
You're right, yeah.
I mean, run and catch you out, but stretching the field, the quarterback has to have a little bit of time.
You're right.
And we haven't gotten into it, but the quarterback's got to play better, for crying out loud.
Yeah, him too.
I mean, holy smokes.
The interceptions.
Those 2 interceptions.
We always used to joke with Clyde Christensen, the position coach, with Andrew Luck. He'd make he called them bonehead plays. And I always used to joke with Clyde, you wish you could stop a game and go to Andrew and say, walk me through it. What did you see to make you think that was open? And that first one to the safety, you're thinking, how do you not see him? And you just can't have a quarterback compounding the problems around him by being so careless. Yeah, the fumbles, but the interceptions are just killers. And each time I thought, for a few times, the protection held up. And that's what you come up with. Mm-hmm. So until they get the line fixed, I don't know how I think they've got one play of 40 yards so far, the Colts do.
And
that's by Pierce.
Tennessee,
one.
Right?
That's just crazy. This team is not good enough to stay out of its own way to drive 10 plays.
Well, the good news is that to get those big plays, as we mentioned, Pierce and Pittman will be back in this game,
Correct.
Which they did not have. So that's going to be massive, especially with Pierce playing so much better. I think it was you who mentioned it, Dave, with teams really putting so much attention on Pittman and double teaming him, bracketing him, having the safety over the top, kind of leaning towards Pittman's side. It's really created opportunities for Pierce. And, it's been a while since the Colts had a good enough number 2 wide receiver to take advantage of when teams really put the clamps down on the number 1. And so that's going to be really big this week, is getting those big plays from Pittman, Pierce, Taylor, if he plays, whoever can come up with them.
Yeah, tight ends have done some good things too. And you look at the Tennessee game a couple weeks ago, when I think Pittman only had 3 catches or something, and it was the tight ends who were doing damage. It was because, they were bracketing Pittman and keeping him from doing anything big, and that's good defensive strategy, because with tight ends, if they're taking small chunks down the field, they're not going to kill you like Pittman can. Like, they don't have the big playability for the most part that Pittman does. We've seen Mo Alley-Cox down the middle of the field dragging 2 defenders. As I said, that's a whole lot of fun watching him do that. But for the most part, if you let tight ends beat you, those are going to be 10 or 12 play drives that get to the end zone. So if you're a defense trying to strategize, Chap, against this Colts offense, you'd much rather let the tight ends try to do that and say, we're going to take our chances and let our defensive ends rush the passer 10 times or whatever it is, and try to make the Colts beat us. And while they're at it, we will beat them in that light and push them back and make the chains longer. And rather than kind of try to do more of an even coverage of the secondary and say, well, whoever beats us. Like, no, let the tight ends beat you. Do it in the middle of the field. Don't let the guys on the outside beat you. That just seems to make sense.
Well, through 5 games, the Colts have shown that if you give them enough opportunities, they'll beat themselves.
Right.
On offense. And that's whether it's a sack, whether it's a offsides or a false start or holding penalties. So that's why I say everything always funnels back to the offensive line, because it's hard to do. They can't be who they are, which is a run team, with the run game like this. It's in shambles. And again, I think Taylor plays this week, but will he be 100%? I don't know.
When my dad taught me how to play ping pong, the one piece of advice that I remember is him saying, you give your opponent enough rope and he'll hang himself. Like, just return the ball. Like, get it back. It doesn't need to be the perfect shot. Get it back. Try to make your opponent move back and forth a little bit. Make it a little complicated so it's not the same thing every time. But just get it back to him. And that's what 10 or 12 play drives are. If teams can do that, then they'll do that all day, and then they'll make the good shot, and they'll beat you. But if you can't do that, if you just can't over and over and over again execute, which this offensive line has not been able to do, then you have trouble.
Trouble on first down, trouble on second down. What was it the other day? 2nd and 38?
I don't know what it was. It was bad.
Was it second, maybe 3rd and 38? Maybe it was.
Remember.
I probably tried to block it from my
Right, it's already gone.
But there were 3rd and 15, 3rd and 12. You hoped you had a 3rd and 7. So it's all that together, and it's just conspiring. Again, let's keep in mind this team has now gone 7 straight games with 20 or fewer points. Mm-hmm. That's obscene. And it's the most since like 1993 by these guys. You just would think at some point you're going to luck into 21 points, but they can't do it.
Colts offense playing like this, I'm not even in a position to talk trash about the Bears in Washington tonight. I have no room to say anything.
Except take the under.
Take the under. That's
what is it, like 37 or 38 right now? Yeah, the under.
Still take the under.
Like we were talking about, like, either way, you have to bet on one of those two teams to do well, or if you take the over, then you're betting on them both to do well. You know, why would you bet on either of these two teams right now with the way they are playing, and much less on both of them? As for this game, the Colts and Jaguars, FanDuel has the Colts 1.5-point favorites at home. The over-under is set at 42.5, so they're predicting like a 22-20 ball game. As Chap said, the Colts have not scored 20 points in quite some time, so they would be breaking the mold if they were to be able to cross that own Mendoza line here in the NFL, if there is such a thing. But I'll go first with my prediction, then Joe, and then Chap can wrap us up here.
I may change my prediction once I hear his.
Exactly. You never know. No, I'm going to take the Colts. I think that their streak here at home against Jacksonville kind of continues here, that they are able to make a play late in the fourth quarter, and they're going to give you that hope. They're going to give you a little bit of hope, at least going into next week. We'll give it a 21-17. I think it's going to be close again in the fourth quarter. Heck, if we learned anything this year, is that the Colts are going to fall behind early, and then Matt Ryan's going to give them a chance in the fourth quarter. If someone on defense can make a play, then they're going to have a chance. Week 1 it was E.J. Speed. Last week against Denver it was Stephon Gilmore. It was Rodney Thomas. It was Grover Stewart with the blocked field goal. Like, someone on defense is going to have to make a play in the fourth quarter, and then someone on offense is going to have to make a play in the fourth quarter. I think in that order for them to pull one out here against Jacksonville. So 21-17 is my pick. Joe, you're next, and then Chap will wrap us up.
Well, God.
Strong conviction here.
I got to take Jacksonville just because that's how this team has gone. Every time this season that you think they're building towards something,
they break your heart.
They break your heart and they fall backwards. And so I think they're going to lose at home to Jacksonville, and then next week they're going to beat Tennessee because that's just what they've been doing all year, back and forth.
Chap.
Did you give a score?
I didn't give a score.
Let's say, Joe, jeez.
Jacksonville's going to score 24 again, and the Colts are going to get 17.
I've got 24-14 Colts.
Hey, whoa, so big winners by 2 scores.
I heard that. That's true. But I had it written down before you said yours.
Okay.
I just think that they're going to find a way on offense. The 24 is probably going to include a defensive touchdown because his offense can't do it. I don't trust the offense. At any level do I trust this offense until they get the offensive line fixed. And this line might be broken for the rest of the season. It really might. But I just think having Pearson, Pittman back is going to help. I think JT plays, and I think he's good enough. I think Naheem Hines plays, and he's good enough. But I just think, like I say, with the streak they've got going at home continues. I think I saw another stat that they've trailed at half in 7 straight games. I think I saw. That's crazy. You just can't. When you're this bad on offense, you can't keep trailing, all game. Mm-hmm. But I think they find a way 24-14, and then for like 10 days, everybody's happy.
It's not tenable to keep doing that.
Correct.
And to be successful. And so much about this Colts team has been not tenable. And that has been the frustrating part of being a Colts fan, has been watching this team, and like you see them pull out a couple wins, but at the same time in the back of your head, they can't keep doing this and be effective at the end of the year.
Well, you're behind Tennessee 24-3, and you come back, but everything has to go right.
Right.
Jonathan Taylor had the fumble on 4th and whatever it was. You can't have that. You can't make a mistake because you've made so many mistakes to get to that point. So they've got to get out of the gate quicker, and this is just blind faith, and I don't know what I base it on because they've given us no reason to trust them. Joe will probably be right, but if they're going to get things going, it's got to start again with Jacksonville at home.
I actually feel better about it now because if we all three would have picked the Colts to win, there's no way they would have.
Right.
So I'm on the right side. It's a win-win situation over here.
There you go. Perfect. All right. We've got things going for us, which is good. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Colts Blue Zone podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone for news and notes throughout the week, injury updates, and the like. Individually, we are at mchappell51. Get Mike's work online at fox59.com and cbs4indy.com. Joe Hopkins is at RotoStreetJoe. I am at DaveG_sports. We appreciate you all, and we will see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.